Hello everyone and welcome to Azam Sharp Weekly. And this video is about thinking out loud. So basically, this video is not going to really teach you anything, but we're just going to engage in a discussion. A couple of days ago, I was speaking at a conference, and one of the attendees asked me that if we are using SwiftUI and we're using all those property wrappers for the Swift data and core data, you know what I'm talking about, the fetch request property wrapper or the new query property wrapper in Swift data, then isn't our view very much tied up to the implementation details for the core data? Like how is that being reused, or how will it behave when we say that, okay, we don't really want to use core data or Swift data, we want to use Realm or DB. So this is the discussion, right? So basically the question becomes that should you be using convenience property wrappers like fetch request or query, or should you be writing your own data access layer? There's no single answer to that question, but I do want to get into a little bit more code to show you that what we're talking about. All right, and I would love to hear from you in the comments that what do you think, right? So let's go ahead and create an application, and I'm just going to say to do list, or okay, you can call it anything you want, I guess. And I'll be using SwiftData because it's just easier to set up SwiftData. All right, there we go. Okay, so if I'm working on this application, which allows me to add a to-do item, and we're not going to build the whole app, we're just trying to see that, like what will happen if somebody down the road, your client decides that, you know what, SwiftData is not working out, and now I need to use Realm or GRDB or some other platform, some other framework, some other API. So let's go ahead and do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a single model class, and I'm just going to enter all of this information over here. I mean, you can obviously create, and you should create, a separate file. So there we go, SwiftData. And we have this model. Now, just by looking at the model, we can already see that this is a SwiftData model because it's decorated with the model attribute. If in the future you decide that you don't want to use SwiftData, like 6 months from now, you want to replace the whole thing with Realm or something else, then you obviously have to go to all of your models and you have to remove the model attribute, the property wrap macro, okay? Okay, so we have this. Now, if we're planning to use all the different property wrappers, all the different features that SwiftData has provided to us, then this means that we can probably just go over here and say model container, right? And we can provide our container for a particular model. So this is how you kind of like set up SwiftData applications. If you haven't really worked with SwiftData, I mean, this is pretty simple stuff, but you can check out some of my other videos, all right? Older videos. Okay, and now if I want to go and I want to say that, well, I want to get everything from the, from the database, and I want to fetch everything from the database, I'll just use the query property wrapper. And if I want to simply display all the things, I will simply go ahead and say to do items. I'll just loop over them, and I'll say to do item, and I will display it to do item dot title, right? Now currently, obviously, we're not really entering anything, we're not really saving anything. For saving, we can follow a similar technique. Using the environment variable, we can get access to our model context, private var context. And if I want to save something, let's go ahead and see if we can, well, this doesn't work. So we'll just have to go ahead and add a list or something. And if I want to add, let's say save to do, I don't really have any text box or anything, but I just want to show you that if you wanted to do it, this is how you can do it. We'll create the new to do item, which will be whatever, let's say wash the car. And if I want to save it, I'll say context dot and insert into the model which is to do item, and you're done. You don't even have to call save because in SwiftUI, the core data, SwiftData will automatically save, all right, depending on the UI behavior. But this is the whole thing. Now, one question you may ask, and I'm a little bit going off the rails over here, is what about the business logic? Are you going to be adding the business logic over here? No. All the business logic will go in the model itself. Currently, we don't really have any business logic, but if you did have any business logic, those things will go in the model. All right. And the context can remain in the view, and we can use that to insert an item. Okay. So this is the code. Now, just by looking at the code, we can already see that we have a query over here. We are kind of like dependent on the model context, and we also have a query property wrapper. This means that this whole view, the content view, is basically kind of like tied up to SwiftData, right? I mean, it's not like I can replace the underlying data access layer. It's always going to be this way. Now, one thing that can work to our advantage in this case is we can compose our views. Instead of just displaying a text over here, we can probably just go ahead and create a item view, which will take in a to-do item. So the item view can be like something like this. It's really simple. And then we can simply call it over here. So I can say to-do item view, passing in the to-do item. Okay. So now in this case, if something changes, if you're like, well, you know what, it's 2 months already passed, and you're like, well, I want to use Realm. So if you want to use Realm, this is not going to work. The query property wrapper is not available in Realm. They have their own things. I think it's called observable object or observable result or something like that. And that is something that you'll have to use. I also think that if you're using Realm or if you want to go to Realm, you will have to change this part. So it's not going to be model. You have to probably go ahead and, create a final class, and then you have to inherit it from different things in Realm. And I think when you're also passing it, it might be a different thing, because all of these, like this one, to do item view, the actual body part can remain the same. That's not a big deal, but this will be something different. All right. I think for Realm, it uses, let me actually double check it, because I think Realm uses something completely different. All right. So the Realm uses something called observe Realm object. So you probably have to do something like this if you're using Realm. So these are the changes that you'll have to make if you go with the Realm route, which means that the content view needs to be changed, but the to-do item view also needs to be changed a little bit, because you need to add something to it, like observe Realm object, if you're using the SwiftUI property wrappers of Realm at least. All right. And the model needs to be changed, because the model can no longer have the add model property wrapper. So that is something also needs to be changed. So all of these things have to be updated. All right, so that's one way of doing things, right? Now, what about if you decide that, well, I'm just going to write my own data access layer, and I'm not going to be using all of these things that are provided by SwiftUI to work with core data, to work with SwiftData, and if you're using Realm, Realm also provides some handy property wrappers that you can use. I think one of them is called like observed results. So that's one of them from Realm. Okay. But let's go with that route. Let's go and create our own data access layer and not be focused or not rely on the things that SwiftUI is providing you. So this means that I'm just going to comment out these things, and we'll get back to that later. There we go. I'm just going to kind of like just say hello world, I guess, at this point. And we'll remove the container also. Okay. So if we are trying to create a brand new data access layer, we will start with a protocol. So let's go ahead and see the protocol. There we go. So it has save to do item and it had get to do items. So these are the two different things. And since we're working with SwiftData and I just want to name it something SwiftData service, so I'm just going to go ahead and implement SwiftData service. There we go. It is conforming to the protocol, which is to do service protocol. So that is what it's conforming to. So in the SwiftData to do service, we are passing in the model context. It needs that to initialize, and it needs that to perform all of these different actions. You can see that we are performing save to do item, we are performing get to do items. So we are doing all of that stuff. All right. So this is one of the implementations of your own custom kind of like a data access layer. All right. But we still have to use it. I mean, so let's go to our content view. So here's our content view right here. And this means that the content view will be dependent on the to-do service protocol. So, okay, so we'll create a service. I mean, I guess I can call it data service if you want. And this will be a to-do service protocol so that you can pass in different concrete implementations also if you want to. And I'll perform the initializer. So this means that the content view now has a dependency on the data service or the to-do data service. So let's go ahead and create that service, data service, to-do data service. Oh, not that, sorry, it's called SwiftData something, right? SwiftData service and the provider. So now we need to find a way to create this particular model context. Without that, it's not going to work. All right, so let me go ahead and comment this out for time being, because this is obviously not going to work. So what we will do is we will create a small Swift data provider. We should probably call it like a model container or a model provider or something like that. But I'm just going to put it over here. All right. So what should we call it? It's a context provider, right? So Swift data context provider, I mean, or something context provider, or just the provider. All right. So this is what we are using right now. We create the shared part of it, we initialize it, and we create the context. And now we should be able to pass it over here, keeping in mind, okay, yeah, so right now we're using SwiftData over here, so that should be okay. So now I should be able to use that. I can use SwiftData provider.shared.context. I think that should probably work. And this has to be in the main actor, so I'm just going to decorate it with main actor in. Okay, it may give us like a warning or something, but that might be like a bug or something. All right, let's go back to our actual code over here, and we need to update that part also. So let's go ahead and update that. It's the same thing. I mean, we're just calling it data service, I guess, over here. But now we're adding all of these dependencies. Don't worry about the warning right now. The warnings may be some sort of a bug, some sort of a limitation. Apple knows about it, and hopefully they'll fix it. Okay. So this is what it looks like. We can remove this part if you want, or we can just keep it commented out. I think this is just for the reference. So now what we're doing is, instead of using the query property wrapper or environment or fetch request in core data, we are creating our own data access layer, and we're going to be using our data access layer to perform certain actions. So let's say that if I want to just get all the to-do items, I can go ahead and create a state and initialize it with nothing. I can also create a function called load to do items. There we go. Load to do items is simply going to call the get to do items function from the service. It will get everything. Actually, that should be called data service, right? Data service. And it's going to get all the items and going to assign it to the to do items. And that is how we should be able to print it. Let's go ahead and build the application. So if I want to simply display all the items, I should be able to use this code to get that. All right. Now, this works. I mean, that's fine. One of the things that we lose by creating our own data access layer in this case is if we add an item, like right now we're not able to add an item because we don't even have a button, but if we do the same approach of just adding a button somewhere, right over here is fine. add item. So if we want to add an item, I can simply call data service dot save to do item, and then I can just create the item and then be done with it. Let's say feed the rabbit. All right. So if I want to do that, I can do it, and that's going to save the rabbit, but it's not really going to update the user interface. Okay. So this means that there are a couple of ways to do that. You can hide all of this data service. I mean, if you're using an MVVM pattern, then this means that your view model will be responsible for calling the data service, and your view is not directly doing that. All right. But even though you do those things, I mean, it doesn't really mean that, you still have to create the data access layer. You have to still create the protocol. I think you're just adding one more layer to it. If you want to, that's fine. So when we're calling the data service over here, the save to do item doesn't really return you anything. So one of the things that you can do is you can simply call load items again, and it's going to load it from the database. Or the save to do item can return you something, and then you can add it to the collection over here, the to do items. Right? But anyway, I mean, it will be very similar to what implementation I'm showing you. If you want to access, or if you want to create a data access layer, you can do it like that. If something changes, and instead of using, because right now you can see that we are injecting the SwiftData to do service, if you want, you can create more implementation for Realm data or Realm to do service. You should be able to hopefully switch these things out quickly. All right. And hopefully they will work as expected. One of the problems, so now we get to the main question is, what approach is better? Is this approach better where you are using the SwiftUI property wrappers, environment model context, or fetch request, or manage object context and query, and all of those things? And these things are performance efficient because they are improved when you are using it with SwiftUI. And when you use query, it also kind of checks that if the item is changed, it's going to reevaluate and re-render your list. So it kind of functions as in core data, you have the NS fetch results controller. So it kind of functions like that. If you create your own data service layer, which you're doing, it doesn't do that. I guess you can make it do that by using combine or something like that, but it doesn't do that by default. All right. So the question that doesn't really have any answer is, or maybe you have an answer, but the question is, which approach should you use? Right? I mean, if you start with your SwiftData and it goes like this, I mean, you're using all the query property wrappers, or if you're using core data, you're using fetch request property wrappers, and they're very helpful. I mean, you have to write a very less amount of code to achieve what you want to achieve, but they do kind of like tightly couple your views with the core data or SwiftData implementation. So if somebody decides 6 months down the road that, hey, you know what, we're not going to use core data or SwiftData, just let's move to Realm or GRDB, then it will be definitely a bit of a pain to change all of those things. But I guess I'll leave you with one question. When was the last time you were working on a project and you implemented, let's say, 6 months of coding and implementation, and after 6 to 8 months they decided that we're going to change the underlying database? I mean, it's not like I'm taking one side or the other. It's just a simple question I'm asking that when was the last time this happened to you? Is that very often that happens? I mean, if it's very often that it happens, then you should probably be going with a data access layer, your custom data access layer, so you can switch it out. If it is once in a blue moon kind of thing, it just happened and it never happened again in 10 years, so I was able to do it. We switched the database in like 2 projects in 10 years. Well, then I guess you should be able to use these things. property wrappers and all the macros that are available to you in SwiftData and core data without any issues. So just like programming questions, I think our architectural question, the answer is it depends. You are just gaining one thing by losing a little bit more flexibility to change that particular layer. If you go and implement your own layer, then you lose tracking and you lose a lot of speed in development because now you're going to be implementing all of those things on your own. So tell me what you think about this, because this is obviously a very tough question to answer. It's a very opinionated question that I'm posing. When was the last time you were working on a project and 6 months or 4 months or 8 months down the road, your client tells you, or your boss or your team leader or architect, whoever, and they said that, okay, you know what, we made a mistake, we're gonna change the whole data access layer to something else. All right, or we're gonna introduce a new data access layer. All right. So think about it and then write it in the comments. Thank you so much. If you like this video and want to support my channel, then the best way would be to check out my courses on Udemy. I just published a brand new course called SwiftData Declarative Data Persistence for SwiftUI. This is currently about like 4 hours of course, but I keep on adding new material as I am also learning about SwiftData. So you're going to learn about SwiftUI state management, getting started with SwiftData, also one-to-many relationship, many-to-many relationship, and also how to use SwiftData in a UI kit application. But keep in mind that I do add new sections as I work on SwiftData more and more. Thank you so much, and make sure to get the link for this course right there in the description of YouTube video. Thank you so much.